I have some breaking news you are not going to want to miss. And that is that Sundays no longer belong to the NFL. Yes, I'm completely aware it's the off season, but even when they come back, Sundays are not for football anymore. Sundays are for MotoGP, at least till November, and then you could have your playoffs, your little Super Bowl too. Everything's going to be okay. But this Sunday in MotoGP, really in all three classes, it was must see TV. But before we get into it, if you can hit like, share, follow, mash all the buttons so you get all the MotoGP goodness that you can handle. Okay, MotoGP in Qatar. Sunday was fantastic, but the drama really started on Friday when the second practice session got rained out, which meant the session that counts to get into qualifying was actually pushed to Saturday. So Saturday was stacked. We had some monster names missing out on Q2. Fabio Quartararo, Joan Mir, both Trackhouse guys, Jack Miller, Marco Bezzecchi, holy crap. And it looked like both Trackhouse racing stars were going to get out of Q1 for the first time in the team's history. But Jack Miller said, hold my Australian beer. He puts in a killer late lap to join Raul Fernandez in the top two and basically dashing the hopes of dreams of Johan Zarco and Miguel Oliveira. In Q2, it was kind of who we expected to see at the top. Jorge Martin takes pole, Aleix Espargaro on the Aprilia running really strong in second. Enea Bastianini outqualifies Brad Binder and his teammate Pecco Bagnaia, and Marc Marquez gets himself on the first two rows, which is bad news for everyone. But the sprint races are going to do what the sprint races are going to do because Jorge Martin just kind of dominates this format. I'm beginning to wonder if this is not a little bit of a conspiracy. Maybe Pramac went to Race Direction and said, hey, do you want to make this championship closer? Give us some sprint races because Jorge will basically never lose them. And from jump, he was pretty much untouchable. Brad Binder went at him a couple of times, but really had nothing for him. Aleix Espargaro got a pretty bad start, but was able to pick his way through the field to join Brad Binder and Jorge Martin on the podium. Pecco Bagnaia and Marc Marquez finished fourth and fifth, which isn't really a disaster for either of them, because remember, these races are half points, so you can make up a lot in the Sunday Grand Prix. And boy, did Pecco Bagnaia make up for a lot on Sunday. Quick programming note before we get into the MotoGP race on Sunday is that you really need to check out the Moto3 and Moto2 race if you're not watching them. Both of them were phenomenal in Qatar. We had battles at the front, overtakes galore. It was really a question of who wanted to win this, and the Moto2 race was one of the most unpredictable, maybe in all of history. But back to MotoGP, it was obvious that Pecco Bagnaia's strategy was to be very aggressive early, get to the front, and lead, which is exactly what he did. He got a really good launch, so did Brad Binder, so did Jorge Martin, but Bagnaia was so aggressive on the early laps to get to the front and put a little bit of a gap. And Brad tried to go with him. He stayed within striking distance the entire race. He just couldn't quite get there. Now, Aleix Espargaro, who was fighting for the podium on Saturday, looked really strong all weekend, was nowhere on Sunday. I think he might have taken a wrong turn. But the most exciting rider on track was maybe Pedro Acosta. I mean, should we have expected anything else? He was burning his way to the front, nipping on Marc Marquez's heels lap after lap. He's right there fighting for the podium. But alas, his tires were not to last. And even though he ended up slipping back, a little bit of inexperience burning up that rear tire, he finishes ninth in the top 10 in his first Grand Prix ever. We're going to see this dude on the podium this year. Back at the front, Pecco Bagnaia was just too freaking good. It's as simple as that. Brad Binder was right there to pick up the pieces on any Pecco mistake, but the mistake never came. And anytime Jorge Martin would start to close in on Brad Binder, Brad would pull the pin, pull out a gap himself. And Marc Marquez looked super menacing in P4. I think a few more races with that Ducati underneath him, and he's making a move onto the podium. It's just a lack of experience at this point. But it's coming, as is Pedro Acosta. Other finishers of note, Enea Bastianini finishes fifth. Alex Marquez finishes sixth with Fabio Di Giannantonio right behind him in seventh, having a much better Sunday than he did Saturday. And in the back, it was a battle of Honda versus Yamaha, and I don't think it really matters all that much who finished where. And that is the full recap for the Qatar Grand Prix in MotoGP, round one in the books. They're off to Portugal next.